Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about Airbnb's Q4 earnings. I'm going to also do some technical analysis as well as go over my price targets, which I have upgraded as I didn't expect them to do so well because of Omicron. But before we begin, I need you to scroll down and hit that like button. That really means a lot to me. So CNBC, Airbnb beats on earnings and gives strong guidance. Airbnb beat Wall Street estimates on earnings and revenue in its fourth quarter. Airbnb is expecting its first quarter 2022 nights and experiences booked to significantly exceed Q1 of 2019 levels. Bear in mind, Q1 of 2019 was a really good quarter for them, and that's what you want to compare because 2020 was all the Rona stuff, so obviously 2020 was just a bad year for Airbnb. So it's good guidance and everything, which is super good for the stock. Let's start off with their financials. So all of these numbers are in thousands. So that's 3.6 billion, 4.8 billion. We'll look at year over year because we've just finished the year. So 2021, we can see that revenue was significantly higher than 2020, but that's because 2020 was just a shit year. So most people and Wall Street really compares to 2019. So we can see pretty good growth there. Profits higher, profit margins are higher, operating expenses are higher, but that just comes with them growing. Income has actually went positive, and then if we look at cash, we've still got 6 billion in cash, which is good. And then if we look at the graph, so you've got revenue in blue, cost of revenue in red, profits in green. We can see significant growth over the years. Now let's look at their financials quarter over quarter. Let's start off with the latest quarter. So revenue came in at 1.53 billion. Cost of revenue was 295 million. And then profit margins were 81. If we compare to 2020, it was obviously a lot higher. It's quite higher, but I haven't got the numbers here for 2019, which is what we should be comparing. But even if we compare with the rest of the year, this is pretty much in line, which is good. Operating expense was higher, but they're just scaling. So because it's still a growth company, in their shareholder letter, they have said that a lot of their advertising and other expenses are gonna go in line with revenue pretty much, but the quarter was still positive. So 2022 might actually be a year where Airbnb actually ends up net positive, because if we look back at last year, so net income over the year was minus 352 million. But yeah, because their guidance is so strong, Airbnb is probably going to end up positive. Yeah, if we compare revenue growth to 2020, last quarter, that's 78%, which is super high. But obviously, 2020 was a bad year. Now, if we look at quarter over quarter, we compare this quarter to this one, nearly double. So it keeps going up, comes back down. Obviously this might be alarming, but in the last earnings, they did guide that Q4 is usually the worst quarter in the travel industry. So revenue being down is fine. It still beat estimates. It beat their own estimates. It pretty much beat Wall Street's estimates. So it's all good. On to booking. So 73.4 million. It's lower than the past two quarters, a lot higher than Q1, but I think we had loads of restrictions back then. If we look at Q4, sort of in line. But if we look at gross booking value and compare to Q4, that's like pretty much a 1.8 billion increase, which is a lot, which is really good, looking positive. And then if we look at gross booking value per night, 153. So if we made a chart of these numbers, we can see that people are willing to pay more and more for overnight stays, which is really good. Plus, people are booking more and more nights. So instead of 1 or 2, people are staying for 7 nights. And then you're seeing they're also seeing a trend in people booking 28 days, for example, because they're choosing to live, which is super good for Airbnb's profits. Before we move on to price targets, I just wanted to go over a few key points they made in their outlook for 2022. So we continue to be encouraged by what we are seeing year to date in 2022. The impact of Omicron has quickly dissipated and guests are confidently booking for the summer travel season early in the year. In the US and Europe in particular, we are seeing lead time for bookings made in Q1 2022 return to pre-pandemic levels. As such, for the first time since the pandemic began, we expect Q1 2022 nights and experiences booked to significantly exceed Q1 2019 levels, which we believe will result in our strongest quarterly night and experiences booked on record. So if we look here at 2019 Q1, nights and experiences booked was 81.3 million, but their gross booking value per night was 122, whereas now it's about 150, maybe more. So if that increases a little bit and we actually beat these numbers, revenues are actually going to come in really strong. So yeah, Q1 of 2022 should look really good, and they're expecting similar growth throughout the year. So Airbnb is probably going to do well. Okay, moving on to price targets. So we'll first look at Wall Street's price targets, and then I'll go through mine. So last earnings, Wall Street upgraded the stock, but then Omicron hit, and you can see there was a lot of downgrades because everyone expected for people to sort of get scared and everything, but that clearly didn't happen. So now Wall Street's upgrading it back again. So the average price target is about 200, which was at the tops back there. Some people are valuing it at estimating about 250, and then the lowest 150, but there was quite a few price targets that came out. Now onto my price targets. So I've assumed that they're going to dilute by 3% year over year. So these price targets are at the end of the year. So 2021, my sort of fair value is 20 times sales, is 176, and the stock's pretty much there. If the market would get euphoric, I would probably value it there, and then if super euphoria at the tops when people are just going crazy and plowing money into the market would be here. But we're not in that sort of market right now because everyone's fearful. We've got in the potential of interest rates going up. Well, they are going to go up at some point, and then we've got the Russia situation and inflation and everything. So I'd probably be looking at this for now, but obviously if the stock went up to into sort of these valuations, I would just take profits, and yeah, I'd be happy with that and wait for it to come back down. So at the end of 2022, I think it's probably gonna be 230. That's if it grows at about 40%. It might be more, I'm not too sure. We don't know so the virus situation isn't done yet. We never know what sort of variant we can get. And then we don't know what the markets are gonna do. Like, is the Fed actually gonna crash the market? So I think these are fairly conservative valuations, so I'd be looking at that. And then obviously if you want to be more euphoric, you look at those valuations. So yeah, those are my price targets. If the stock dropped, let's say 30% below that, so what would that be, like 120, 130 maybe, I would probably start looking at getting in. But I'll do the technical analysis right now, and I'll go through areas where I would potentially enter if I was to buy more. Moving on to technical analysis. This is a weekly chart. I want to look at the weekly because they tend to be respected a lot. So the 50 moving average is sitting at 164. It will act as support. It seems that obviously we went down, we went back up, we did back test it. So as long as we can open this week and not fall below, what's this line sitting at, 173? That would be good if we ride this line, but that might break as it's the weekly anyway. It's just an uptrend. The 50 moving average is more important. So as long as we close the Friday overhead, it's fine. I'm just a little bit worried about the market and the Russian situation, as it seems like it moves on headlines right now. So any bad news just sends everything down. Airbnb has stayed strong compared to the market, so that's good. Anyway, so let's have a look at support now. So the yellow line is the weekly, so watch the Fridays. Let's say, for example, we drop here on Wednesday. I would still be looking to close the Friday over that line. Usually what tends to happen is, let's say you're under the 50 weekly moving average, buyers come back in, or if you're over it and there's motivation for them to close it under, sellers come back in. So support, aside from the 50 weekly moving average, this is a daily chart. So the 50 daily moving average is going to act as support, and then the 200 is going to act as support. If we lose both of those, we're probably going to these lows, which is at sort of 150. It's a round number. I would expect buyers to come back in. And then we'll be looking at these lows here, which is at about 141, and then these previous lows, and then these lows. And then if we cut below, we're probably looking at IPO lows at 121, and then if it goes lower, then yeah, it's hard to tell how low it will go. But that would probably only happen if the market actually crashed. We're not in an actual market crash. March was a flash crash. Yeah, we're not there. Sorry, March of 2020. Anyway, resistance. So we're looking at these tops. We need to close over those tops. If we look here, we never actually closed the candle. So it pierced above, then they sold it off. Pierced above, sold it off. So we kind of want to close over these tops and maybe backtest them. Then we'll have resistance here. Those tops. So I would like to see Airbnb do something like this. So let's say we bounce off this uptrend, come back up, go over, bounce, reject that, backtest that, go back over it, backtest that. This sharp uptrend isn't gonna hold forever, so at some point it's gonna get revised. And then all of these tops right here are probably gonna act as resistance. There's a double top here. It's probably going to be stronger resistance. That's going to be strong resistance. But if Airbnb can break out, then it's going to go all-time highs and people are probably going to buy. But obviously the market is very fearful and that might not happen. It is very choppy. It's one of those stocks that's quite hard to trade because it moves really big. There is opportunity here, but yeah, personally for me, I would rather just wait for it to cut under my price targets and then get in and just hold it, because in my opinion, I think Airbnb is going to do really well over time. So there's easier stocks to just day trade. We've come to the end of this video. If you found it valuable, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments down below what are your price targets for Airbnb.